Greetings. My name is Lauren Alderfer, and I write on a blog about mindfulness, dementia, and psychedelics. And in this journey, I have come across so many other caregivers, and it has really broken my heart time and time again. But also, as I walk my own path, and that with my husband with early stage Alzheimer's, and with his full support to share our story, I just feel that we don't have enough resources as caregivers. And so today, I'd like to share with you an overview of something that has helped me in my own path, and that is microdosing and approaching microdosing from a real place of mindfulness. And for caregivers, I have found that in my own case, it has helped me in so many ways. So this is an unexplored territory for most. So I hope you find this overview of mindful microdosing for caregivers helpful. I have been speaking out much more about mindful microdosing, and in this presentation, I also just want to highlight and give thanks to two very talented artists, a father and daughter team from Costa Rica, and Thais Jimenez. And I always like to start out with helping us getting grounded in more mindfulness. So I invite you to get in a comfortable position, and if it is safe, to either close your eyes or turn down your gaze, or just bring your focus of attention to your belly. Just gently inviting a focus of attention to the belly as you breathe in and as you breathe out, not changing anything, just gently inviting in a greater awareness of your breath. Breathing in and breathing out at your own pace in your own way, but with greater attention, greater focus of bringing the mind, gathering the focus of attention to the undulating inhalation and exhalation of your belly breath. This belly breath, you can invite it in as an anchor of your being, an anchor breath, anchoring you in the inside, interior, most deepest place inside yourself through the connection to your breath, breathing in and breathing out. This anchor, breathing in and breathing out, can help connect to the anchor with which is always present, a wholeness that is always there. Bringing attention to this breath, this anchor breath of the inhaling and exhaling breath can help connect to the anchor, your anchor, available to you always. Breathing in and breathing out with a greater focus of attention, with a deeper invitation to connect to that living, breathing, ongoing miracle of the breath, breathing in and breathing out. Feeling a stronger sense of sturdiness, of an anchor holding you, guiding you, but always keeping you steady, always availing itself through the connection and awareness of the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. Understanding that this anchor breath is a nourishing breath to help steady the storms that may be above the surface, the winds that thrash us from side to side, the waves that sometimes may feel overwhelming, bringing the ship below the surface, but always bouncing back up as the anchor holds you steady, breathing in and breathing out, connecting to this anchor breath, always available, always there, with mindful awareness and attention to the breath, nourishing a steadiness, an interior calm, a greater sense of well-being, a greater nourishment of strength and resilience. Breathing in and breathing out and feeling this anchor of this belly breath, the anchor breath, filling you, guiding you, holding you, nourishing you. Breathing in and breathing out. Always an invitation to come back to the breath, always your companion. And with that mindful awareness, that focus of attention, connecting to this deeper ground of well being, this anchor breath invites you to be this nourishing companion, this anchor and steadiness in the storms of life, but always nourishing a greater ground of well being, a greater sense of wellness. And as you continue to feel that inhaling and exhaling of the anchor breath, let it fill you and nourish you before we transition back out into a more outward focus. But being grateful that for this connection, always inviting you to come back to this ground of well being. And as you transition out, I invite you to move your fingertips and your toes, stretching your body, flickering your eyelashes, coming back with a more steadiness, a more sense of well being and wholeness, a wholeness that is always you. Thanking the anchor breath for connecting us to this greater sense of wholeness, this mindful practice as an invitation for greater wellness, greater wholeness. And now, as we look at this image, we can see that perhaps you also feel that greater light of awareness, a greater sense of openness and well being from this simple but always accessible mindfulness practice of anchor breath. And I ask myself and I ask you, as a caregiver, really, what is it that we want to feel? And it may be something different for you, but what came to me to share today is that we want a greater sense of well being, a sense of being grounded in who we are, in our fullness of who we are. We want to be healthy. We want to remain in good health through the demands of a caregiver. And whatever we offer, ideally, it's from the heart, in goodness and in kindness, but from the heart, not out of frustration. So, this offering of our caregiving ideally comes from this place. And when it does, we can be surrounded in a deep, loving kindness that we're offering, but we're also nurturing inside ourselves. So, in a sense, caregiving is an opportunity of nurturing greater loving kindness. And as we do that, we're living with a sense of expansiveness, an expansiveness of our heart and mind in how we feel, in what we do, as opposed to being in a state of contraction and fear and frustration. So, as we expand in our heart and mind, there is like this field of positivity that we are also nurturing and fueling. This is ideally what I would want as a caregiver. And I offer it up to you as something that, as you can see in the acronym, it's WHOLE. We want to feel whole. However, how often do you feel the opposite with this role as a caregiver? And from the URL that you see below, I gathered this information on 3 stages of caregiving. That is this first stage of caregiving stress. Do you have any of these symptoms of caregiving stress? It is stress. And all of these symptoms, whether it's feeling more irritated or angry or having trouble concentrating or being forgetful, not sleeping well, higher blood pressure, any signs of these tensions is a growing sense of stress that I would say is a normal understanding of the stresses of caregivers. But as we see, as it's pointed out as symptoms, it helps us to understand that yes, this is and can be part of it. But then part of what I'm presenting today on mindful microdosing for caregivers is how can we alleviate some of these stressors that are common for caregivers. Stage 2 from the same website is going a little further. Do you have any of these symptoms that is now getting towards caregiver burnout, fatigue, or apathy, not feeling like you really have the strength to do anything? Anxiety and depression, irritability and social withdrawal. Again, not concentrating as well, but it's at a different level. A lack of sexual drive, being a little more negative, thinking more cynically, and either changing some of the habits around drinking or having coffee or smoking. All of these and more are part of pointing towards a more concerning stage of caregiving, and that is that burnout stage. Anxiety and depression, with those overwhelming feelings at times of grief and sadness, can lead to this. All of this is understandable, and we can see it even documented here as typical symptoms. But again, mindful microdosing, how has it helped me that I'll share with you in this presentation for many of these symptoms that I also experienced? And now we get to stage 3 as it is listed in this website, and that is compassion fatigue. Do you have compassion fatigue where really that sense of hopelessness and meaningless is even greater? And chronic headaches or chronically feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and drained. And of course, if there are any suicidal ideation, then do seek medical help immediately. These are when it comes to the point of needing more professional help. But I'm pointing this out to share as a caregiver myself that these are symptoms that are listed, and you can find others on websites from um, many different sources and clinics and hospitals and assisted living um, places such as Arbor's assistedliving.com, where it is meant to help so that we can better identify what is happening and then seek the help that might be necessary. So for me, I'm only sharing my own journey and why I speak out on mindful microdosing, and many people don't even know what it is. So let me explain. Microdosing is usually considered something that involves a psychoactive ingredient, but not always. However, magic mushrooms tend to be the most common substance being used, and I would like to compare it as using an herbal supplement or an Ayurvedic um, application that you might take. And I don't think you would think twice if someone's taking some rosemary oil or some vitamin C or an Ayurvedic treatment, which oftentimes involves gathering different herbs and boiling them in oil and then applying them on your body. And they alchemize oftentimes to give something even greater than the herbs in their natural state. I also compare it to this sense that there is an alchemy when you microdose because it always involves or ideally involves having an intention. So having this sense of feeling more calm or more positive or more whole or always coming from a place of loving kindness, when you have some kind of intention that guides you as you microdose, there's this alchemy to help you let that intention manifest. It is for your greatest good. because there is a reciprocal relationship with, in this case, let's point to, say, magic mushrooms. There's a reciprocal relationship to this psychoactive ingredient with your intention and how you ingest at a microdose. Now, a microdose means no hallucinations. It means that you can drive a car, you can continue on with your day. It is a very, very minimal dose. If you are not able to do drive, or if you see some hallucinations, that is absolutely not a microdose. That is higher than a microdose. So we're talking about something that really is like an herbal supplement in the sense that sometimes I compare it to a cup of espresso. Sometimes I feel like the caffeine can be more of a of a reaction than even a very minimal microdose can be. But why does it also microdosing in my mind, and what I talk about and support is mindful microdosing, because I do believe if you microdose with truly a microdose that is just enough to have a bit of an impact, but not one in which it prevents you from doing any of your normal activities and one in which you are not hallucinating, I believe that it helps you to become more aware in a mindful way of looking at what's happening in the day and just being able to note how you're feeling without getting drained or overwhelmed by that feeling. So there's an awareness that gets built up, a mindful awareness, and then there's that choice of, rather than reacting, there's more of a gap where you can make a choice so that you can be more proactive in how you interact with the situation before you. And this brings a sense of greater equanimity, a greater sense of non-reactivity. So you're more connected to that anchor, that well-being inside of you. Therefore, you can go about your day or your evening or your night with that greater sense of equanimity and calm. And of course, that is the foundation for more loving kindness, to really connect to your heart and mind with greater kindness, with more loving attention and nourishment of that loving kindness that can then be expressed. So mindful microdosing ideally can be a way of supporting these things to be more active in your life. So, how can mindful microdosing help me, help you, help caregivers feel more whole? What I want to do now is go over some of the benefits that have been reported with microdosing, usually with magic mushrooms, psilocybin being the uh, ingredient in them. So, let's first start with well being. Definitely, people report that they just feel more grounded in who they are. They're not like pushed from one side to another where they just lose their own footing. So there's more sense of you being who you are with your sense of calm and feeling grounded, because there's a greater connection to self with that mindful awareness. One of the things I love about microdosing is what I'm sharing as benefits is not just something in your head, but it's more of an embodied sense. So, this feeling connected to self is in an embodied way that you feel that, oh, yes, I'm not getting lost in all this. I'm connected to this deeper sense of well being and nourishment. And with that comes this greater sense of presence. Uh, Over the years, as I do mindfulness practices with groups of people, usually when I ask them how they would describe it, one of the main things people say is feeling a greater sense of presence, that present moment awareness. Mindful microdosing also helps us, and that points back to that mindful awareness of being able to be in that gap of non-reactivity, that greater sense of presence. And usually when there's presence, there's a greater calm and there's a greater sense of nourishing, a greater sense of peace and well-being. Mindful microdosing helps people understand and make decisions around their own needs, not to the detriment of others, but certainly not to the detriment of oneself. So healthy boundaries seems to be one of the benefits that people who have been microdosing report. So, for instance, being sure that there's time to exercise, being sure that there's time to get healthy food, being sure that there's time to have moments of calm for oneself. And another benefit is this idea of being more proactive versus reactive, because microdosing does enhance this sense of greater presence in terms of mental time, a mental pause, a mental sense, and an embodied sense of, oh, here I am. What is my choice? What are my choices? I have the power to make these choices. So again, it is from this sense of proactive. And when we're proactive, there is this sense that we have options, we have choices. It's a more positive leaning understanding towards the challenges that we face. So these are some of the benefits that I believe nourish greater well being. Now let's look at some of the specific health benefits that are reported again. And what I'm sharing are very commonly reported benefits of microdosing. And one of the most is this idea that there is less stress, anxiety, and depression. In fact, microdosing oftentimes helps people get off SSRIs or prevents them. In my case, I believe that it has really helped me stay extremely positive amidst the challenges of caregiving. Um, and of course, as I'll go over at the end of the presentation, if you are on SSRIs, I would never advise you to just get right off of them. Always seek out medical advice. But we do see in the medical literature now that the microdosing, the ingredient in magic mushrooms, works on the same receptor in the brain as the SSRIs. So we are seeing more studies. Johns Hopkins right now is looking at studies for people with dementia. And anxiety and depression, because in their studies they have seen that it is definitely a positive impact lifting anxiety and depression also from terminally ill people with cancer in some of the studies. So we're seeing this in the medical research, but in the average person we can see that microdosing has helped people feel less stressed, less anxious, and less depressed. And of course that helps us feel more positive. We also see that there's more mental clarity. Oftentimes, people report with microdosing that they can figure out a problem better. It's very popular amongst students who are finishing up a thesis because they can have their focus of attention for a much greater period of time. In my own husband, in early stages of Alzheimer's, his mental clarity is much greater when he microdoses. So it is definitely one of the factors that we can keep our focus of attention greater through mindful microdosing. One of some of the studies of the brain show that as we are increasing our neuroreceptors and the synapses in our brain, we are growing them, connecting more. So of course that will help with our mental clarity and acuity. The motivation, of course, as I mentioned, is that then you're going to feel more uplifted. You're going to feel more positive with life. So these ideas of more positivity, more mental clarity, and just general motivation is definitely good, as well as I did not mention here, but magic mushrooms has been shown to just boost our immune system as well. So of course that's going to help us stay healthier. Better sleep is one of the most reported benefits of microdosing. And as we know, you cannot underestimate how better sleep is going to help every other part of our health. Another interesting benefit of microdosing is more physical endurance. So whether that's in sports, because we even in Golf Digest several months ago, there was a article on some of the well-known golf players microdosing. We see this if you look it up online about some of the sports and microdosing, you will see that it helps with physical endurance. But as caregivers, I think this is important because, at least speaking for myself, I'm running all day long. Who's doing the shopping? Who's doing the cooking? Who's doing the cleaning? It goes on and on. And so having more physical endurance, not getting as tired, certainly is a help for a caregiver. And so all of these are benefits that microdosing's potential is for one's health. Now, let's look at offering. Caregiving ideally is something we do from our heart, that we're offering care, we are giving care. And part of that is having more empathy, having more tolerance and ease in how we give our care, how we offer it up. And I know there are moments of, or days or months, depending on each person, feeling frustrated, resentful, overwhelmed, angry. So that's not the best way of giving our care, even though those feelings are understandable. So if we can have more empathy in the way that we are offering our care, and if we get less frustrated and have more tolerance and can move with greater ease, then I think these are definitely ways of helping to have our caregiving be more of an offering to another. And it points back to something. I lived in the Indian subcontinent for many years, and there is a term, and if you've practiced yoga, you've heard it, this idea of seva. And seva is, and of course we have it, is volunteerism when we're helping others. But this idea of seva goes so deep inside as a true, um, almost like you've been blessed to be a caregiver. And that might not always be easy to hear, but it changes the narrative around, oh, this is my opportunity to serve, my opportunity to really be of service to another. Now, I don't mean that in a way of giving 100% of letting go of yourself, because as I started out, our well-being is of primary concern. Your health is of primary concern. If you're going to be compassionate towards another, it always starts with self-compassion to oneself. So when you are in a state of greater awareness, of greater well-being and in good health, then this idea of offering out from that sense of seva has a greater chance of spreading that way of being with another, which I believe is grounded in loving kindness. And if we do things through that understanding of loving kindness and really embodying loving kindness towards ourselves to the greatest extent of our ability, capability, capacity, but to be authentic with yourself, that the loving kindness starts towards yourself. So self-compassion is so important as a caregiver, and having that greater sense of ease and tolerance for yourself and in what you do and what you can handle. I think forgiveness is another area that we see that can be so helpful and forgiving. If something happens and you've done your best, forgive. That loving kindness has that deeper sense of forgiving. Now, all of these benefits are reported with people who microdose. There is a greater sense of loving kindness and self-compassion that comes about. There's sometimes epiphanies or greater understandings, aha moments, where that deep sense of being an anchor of wholeness, this ground of well-being, which you are, allows for and invites in this embodied sense of loving kindness first towards yourself, forgiving, that self-compassion. So that helps us accept what is in all its fullness. And that points to just having a greater sense of mindfulness, a greater sense of walking in this world with a heart of mindfulness as a caregiver, doing your best, living your authentic self, but with this growing sense of self-compassion, of loving kindness, of forgiveness, and a sense of seva, also towards yourself. And lastly, if we can do this, people do report that there is this expansiveness that they feel. And I say in heart and mind, and in many traditions, that's just one word, heart mind. And it's that sense that our heart is connected to our thoughts and emotions and feelings and sensations. And so as we feel that there is hope, that there is this sense of expansiveness and options, then we can live with a more open sense. And I do believe that that brings in more positivity as opposed to feeling completely contracted and living in so much fear and overwhelm that we can't connect to that. So, microdosing mindfully helps to bring this about. We connect to a deeper wisdom and understanding of that deeper sense of the wholeness, which you are, we are, each one of us is. And it helps us to have that outwardly generating positive outlook. So, this is in general for anybody that microdoses. These are common benefits reported. But really, for caregivers, it's so much more important that this can really help in this path, in this journey as a caregiver. So, these are some of the benefits of microdosing. It helps to feel more whole, the wholeness that you always are. It is always who you are. It is getting disconnected through the overwhelm of caregiving. But when we can connect back to it, and I believe mindful microdosing is one of the supports or tools available to us, we can feel that wholeness. We can live with greater wholeness. So, as a caregiver, I very much believe that mindful microdosing helps us feel whole. And what I offer is that if this does resonate with you, and if you have a few moments of silence, bring the breath to that anchor breath and offer, invite in this deep intention. And if you decide to ingest and try to mindfully microdose, a beautiful intention is to say and feel and believe and connect to, I am whole. Look at the light of awareness from your heart. Feel the rainbow of the world. The wholeness in which we live is here to support you always through these difficult challenges. But ideally, to walk with these challenges with a heart that is open, a heart of loving kindness, a heart and mind that is ready to offer through seva, through kindness, who we are, and in so doing, connecting us to our own loving kindness, to the wholeness with which you are. And I do also want to point out that anything that I have just shared is really for information purposes. It's for educational purposes around microdosing. It is for harm reduction purposes. I do know that people can find information and can source different substances for microdosing without any guidance at all. I do not think that is safe. And so I am an advocate, an educator in understanding that information is power and it is harm reduction. I do not get involved with sourcing or selling or promoting products. It is more for showing that there is education around microdosing that is very important for harm reduction. I always believe that you should seek out medical advice. And if you do decide to microdose, as I say, I don't recommend it on your own. And one of the things that microdosing tends to do is it amplifies feelings. So if you're feeling particularly frustrated or sad or overwhelmed, then it may even add and amplify those feelings if you're not microdosing at a level that's adequate for you. So you need to understand that you microdose at the lowest effective dose so that you avoid this amplifying feeling, this amplification of feelings. But to be aware that that can happen if you're not being facilitated by someone who really knows what they're doing that can guide you through the process. And that is why I also believe that if you do decide to microdose, please seek out a certified coach that knows about microdosing. They will always have a thorough intake form to look at your medical history. Microdosing is not for everybody, and it is certainly not for someone who has suicidal ideation or has psychotic thoughts. So please, it is when I talk about mindful microdosing, it is for the general public, and it is not for people with these overwhelming feelings that are drowning them. It's really as a preventative to not get to that point as a caregiver. Again, consult your medical professional and also know your local laws. As I've said before, um, there are there are products that are non-psychoactive that can be used for microdosing, certain teas and herbs, but often most of them, when we talk about microdosing, does refer to psychoactive ingredients, which are legal in many places, but are not in others. So do know your local laws. If you want to know more about any of my offerings, please go to my website, laurenalderfer.com, and I have also included a mindful microdosing. I'm sorry, I've also included a mindfulness practice specifically for caregivers. This is slightly less than 10 minutes as a guided practice. It's an audio that you can listen to at any time, and it is for free. This is my gift and my offering to help uplift and support all of us who are caregivers, as I know that sometimes we may feel isolated, that we are alone. And this is, in a way, an offering in the hopes that you feel connected, that I am offering a connection through the mindfulness practice for caregivers. I do hope that it helps you through the day and helps you to feel more uplifted. Again, go to my website where I have quite a few different things that are available and accessible to you, including a course on mindful microdosing, as well as information on one-on-one coaching and other webinars that are available. I also have a book available on Amazon that goes over mindful microdosing, as well as a webinar, a 1 hour webinar on my website that is a video somewhat like this, but it goes over the book plus more about how to bring more mindfulness into your day as pillars and also as pillars for mindful microdosing. And you can always follow me on Instagram, reach out to me through my website. But more than anything, I hope that this offering of this overview of how to mindfully microdose, specifically why it can help as a caregiver, has been meaningful to you and it can help you connect more to yourself in a way that this journey becomes one filled with more positivity, more loving kindness, that you feel more whole in who you are, that who you always are. Thank you.